Hello and welcome to this week's Life App, week's Life App. So on Sunday, myself, Dave and Pam spoke about the kingdom of heaven and retirement. And I even explained on Sunday, what does a young man like me in his early 20s know about retirement? But for me with retirement, I'm obviously not there yet, but with my own dad, I saw him go through retirement and learn some things as well. Dave and Pam shared their experience of retirement, which I found I've learned so much from as well. But retirement's actually a transition where you've got new beginnings. Every time there's a new beginning, there's endings as well. And I know a few bits about that. So we pulled together our wisdom and preach from that. And hopefully this Life App will open up some of it a bit more. First question, which I would love you to kind of work out and discuss a bit, is retirement is definitely a transition, which is a big life transition, which causes all sorts of questions and things like that. But that's also a time where God can come in and move and show us a thing or two, even new, or confirm stuff about himself. So as a group, what I'd love you to do is kind of think back about any transition in life. And if you have retired, then maybe focus on retirement. I think that would be really helpful. And just take 5 minutes to think about what you learned about Jesus within that transition. And is there anything that you're really grateful for, really thankful for? What did you see about him that you can reflect back on and think, I'm so grateful that he's like that? But also that you would love to share with a group to help encourage them in any transition that might come. So include retirement. If anyone in your group's retired, give some space to them. What did they learn through retirement itself? But above and beyond that, anyone that's been through a transition, what did you learn about Jesus that you are really, really grateful for? Go for it. Spend some time with that. Pause the video. And once you're done, restart it. And I'll be back with another thing to talk through. Okay, so I said a minute ago, I mentioned on Sunday that retirement is an actual transition, and transition pretty much always begin kind of like those new beginnings include some endings as well. So transition can be a bit shaky, can make you feel all sorts of things. And I mentioned on Sunday the fact that Hebrews 12:28 talks about us inheriting, being a part of an unshakable kingdom. And so you've got this element with a transition where the stability, that knowing that the kingdom of heaven is unshakable, that brings us a huge amount of faith really, and a huge amount of hope and a huge amount of purpose, knowing that at a time that's quite shaky. But the reality as well is that we still need to kind of process some of these things that go on. The reason why I'm going to talk about this is good to open up really how people, all the different feelings that a transition can bring. And I mentioned on Sunday, there's 3 or 4 different areas that transition there's a bit of a process that can happen. The first one is there's a disengagement. You kind of stop doing something. So there's a disengagement that can kind of take you out of what you used to socially. So what you used to with your identity. So there's a bit of disengagement from where you were plugged into and coming out of that. There's a bit of a dismantling where you come out of something important and you change, and you begin to kind of, over a period of time, you can begin to question some stuff, feel different, wonder about different things that have changed. And it feels like who you were sometimes it literally sometimes feels like something's being dismantled along the way. And you've got this idea of this identification where who you were, where you found your identity in your workplace, for example, within retirement, all of a sudden you kind of lose that. And it's really normal to begin to wonder, right, well, who am I now? What's my purpose? What's my reason? Because I've been doing this thing for a long time. I'm so used to being engaged in an area of life like work. Then all of a sudden with retirement where you're not at work or whatever that might be, there's a bit of a disidentification that can happen. And you've got another thing called disorient. There's a lot of disorientation. Where for a period of time you can be like, well, what now? Who am I? What's my purpose? I don't quite know what the future looks like. The reason why I say that is that these things are really normal, but never really talked about. And you can feel all these things and wonder what's going on. And so to verbalise it, I think is really helpful. Anyway, why have I said that? You've got the reality of an unshakable kingdom. okay? Hebrews 12:28. You've got the reality though of all these feelings and wondering of what's going on in a big transition, and especially with retirement. So here's my question. What principle do you see in the Bible which will help you in those different feelings? Okay, I've said one already, the principle that we have an unshakable kingdom. But at a time when there's so much going on, what other principles do you think you can really rely on during that moment of retirement, during that change and that transition, which will hold you fast, which will give you direction, which will keep your purpose? When you're questioning all these things, what will align you to know how to go forward? Okay, so that's the next question. Hope that makes sense. I'll put a slide up with those 4 disc bits, okay? So there's something to look at. When that comes up, pause the slide, talk about that, and then restart it, and we'll come back to continue the last bit of the Connect group. Okay, I hope you got through that okay. I hope you were able to share some of those principles that you would know or really found out really from the Bible, from the kingdom of heaven, which is really helpful in any transition. For me, during any transition, I've been through a few kind of different life transitions, really, not retirement, but a few of those. For me, what I find really helpful is where there's a lot of beginnings and endings, is always remembering that ultimately Revelation tells us that our King Jesus is the beginning and the end. So within all our kind of new beginnings and endings and things like that, I always come back to the fact that if I come to Jesus, who is my Lord, I invite him into all these situations. I ask him to lead me and guide me. It always gives me huge faith and trust to know that he is the ultimate beginning and he is the ultimate end, and he understands and is in control of the whole lot. So what better place to come to than him himself and include him and make him Lord of our lives in those times? And I just find that hugely encouraging and really strengthening. So, and he also went through his own kind of changes and transitions as well, which again is what I said about on Sunday. So another principle, another kingdom principle that will not change in retirement, okay, especially in retirement, is the fact that we are called to make disciples. We are called to be witnesses. And that's a principle that just continues throughout life. The moment we become a Christian, that's a mission that we're called to. And so the next question really to open up, and especially those that have been retired as well, what's your experience on some of this? How have you ended up in places that you've never been in before, where you're actually able to be a witness? What do I mean by that? So I think when you retire, you end up mixing with people and in places that you haven't really normally done before, purely because you're at work and all your time is taken up there. All of a sudden you might have more space and time, so you find yourself mixing with different people. Just wondering, opening up really, what do you think the different areas of life that will open up will be to be a witness, and what does that look like? So that thought of who's in your hand at any moment, at any point that you can be a witness to, what that might look like when you retire. And maybe pray for one another. If anyone's in that situation, if you are retired, pray for one another. Pray that you'll be an influence. Pray that Jesus would speak to you. And that in your witness, it would be really, really effective, okay? So in a moment, we're going to come back and continue this bit on. But on this one, the question is, think about how you can be a witness in retirement, how that might change, and what that actually looks like. Okay, last bit. I think I said the last one was the last bit. Sorry about that. You know what I'm like now. Anyway, the last bit, Dave and Pam brilliantly, I think Dave opened up what it was like there are things that you can learn for when Paul, the Apostle Paul, was in confinement himself. And there are some things that you can actually learn from him around the whole idea of retirement, and when you come to it, and we can have these plans on what that period of our life might look like. But when those plans change for whatever reason, like for my dad, he retired. 6 months later, my mum passed away, so they had all of these plans. But then all of a sudden for my dad, he lost his wife, and it's like, well, how do I even go on with that? You know, what does it look like for things to change massively? out of the blue or wherever it is, for what you thought your future would look like when it no longer looks like that. So how do you deal with that? And Dave brilliantly opened up the whole thing of Paul in confinement, where he was committed to God's sovereignty overall. You know, like that idea that God is sovereign over my life and over what's around it, and the Apostle Paul committed himself to that. The Apostle Paul was content in his situation of whatever happened. He found contentment in whatever was going on around his life. He was confident in his future. The Apostle Paul had a confidence in his future. Even in all of that, when he was in confinement and feeling all those things, he was concerned for his brothers and sisters. Paul always had a concern, no matter what his situation was. He still thought of others, and he had a huge concern for the family of God during those times. And the last one was he always contended for souls. Always contended for souls. Nothing stopped him from being a witness or an influence. And wherever life took him, whether it was in confinement, he still found space and place to witness and be that for Jesus. And ultimately he ran his race, and he wanted to run it well. So the last one then, I'm going to put those few things up on a slide in a moment. When you see that, pause the video. And like we've done with the other ones, just maybe look through those, talk through those. What does God's sovereignty look like? Is it difficult? And does any of that help you in your situation where you plan for life to be like something and maybe it's changed? And maybe as a group, if you feel comfortable, only if you feel comfortable, maybe open up about some of this and spend some time praying with one another. You know, thanking God that he is sovereign, but helping encourage one another in that, if that's difficult, which sometimes it is. You know, how can we be content in the situation that we find ourselves? And how can we support one another in that? And also contend for those people around us that don't know Jesus. So open some of that up, pray into it, spend some time together. That's the end of the life app, I suppose. And we'll just say, really, I know this is about retirement, but I've tried to open it up into other areas. But it is about retirement. And I think that retirement's a time of transition, which, if you include kingdom of heaven principles, can be massively influential, can be huge, a time of massive growth. And actually, I pray that anyone who's been through retirement, going through that thing, that I really hope this has been helpful. And it's a great time to reconsider or reflect on, okay, where am I at in my life? What kingdom of heaven principles can I re-put in if I've left them out or forgotten about them? And sharpen my faith up in Jesus and being effective for him, I suppose. That's the end of it. Brilliant. Thanks for listening. Have a great evening. Enjoy your biscuits, cakes, teas, coffees, whatever else you might be doing. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.